The stars looked cold and empty from the bridge of the Krillian battlecruiser Void Piercer. Admiral Zexthaner stood with his forearms crossed behind his back, watching the view screen with sharp yellow eyes. His scales rippled with annoyance as he waited. "Admiral, the human ships are approaching," said his communications officer. The young Krillian's voice trembled slightly. This was the first time any of them had seen these new creatures called humans. "About time," Zexthaner growled. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "These humans kept us waiting for 3 hours. Very rude." The human ships came into view slowly. Zexthaner studied them with growing confusion. The vessels looked old and primitive. They were made of simple metal, not the advanced materials that most spacefaring races used. Worse, they moved using chemical rockets that left bright trails of fire behind them. "Sir, how did these creatures even reach space?" asked Lieutenant Kirksnell. "Their technology looks hundreds of years behind ours." Zexthaner nodded in agreement. The Krillian ships used clean plasma engines that bent space itself to move. Their hulls were made from quantum-forged crystals that could stop almost any weapon. These human ships looked like they were built in some primitive factory. "Perhaps they found some old technology," Zexthaner said. "Many young races discover ancient ruins and copy what they find." The largest human ship moved closer. It was called the Horizon's Edge, according to their communications. The ship was painted white and blue, with strange symbols on its side. A voice came through the speakers, speaking in the universal trade language. "This is Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. We come in peace and hope to establish friendly relations with your people." Zexthaner listened to the translation device convert the human words. The voice sounded young and nervous. These humans probably had never met another intelligent species before. "Open a channel," Zexthaner ordered. He straightened his military uniform and put on his most official expression. "Human vessel, this is Fleet Admiral Zexthaner of the Krillian Empire. You will prepare to be boarded for inspection." There was a long pause before the human responded. "Admiral, we appreciate your greeting, but we're here for peaceful negotiations. We have full diplomatic immunity under galactic law." Zexthaner laughed, a sound like metal scraping stone. "Galactic law? You primitive creatures have no standing in galactic law. You barely qualify as a spacefaring race." On the view screen, he could see more human ships arriving. They were even more pathetic than the first one. Some looked like cargo haulers converted for military use. Others appeared to be civilian ships with weapons bolted onto their hulls. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "I count 12 human vessels. All are using outdated technology. Their weapons appear to be simple kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives." "Kinetic projectiles?" Zexthaner asked in disbelief. "You mean they shoot metal bullets? Like some ancient ground-based army?" "Yes, sir. Very primitive. Our shields will stop such weapons easily." Zexthaner felt insulted. Here he was, one of the most feared admirals in the Krillian fleet, facing enemies who fought with technology his ancestors had abandoned thousands of years ago. It was embarrassing. "Human Morrison," he said into the communication system, "you will surrender your ships immediately. Your species will become a client race of the Krillian Empire. This is not a request." Another pause. When Morrison spoke again, his voice was harder. "I'm sorry, Admiral, but we cannot accept those terms. Earth is a free world, and we intend to keep it that way." "Then you choose death," Zexthaner said simply. He cut the communication and turned to his weapons officer. "Charge all plasma batteries. Target their largest ship first." The Void Piercer's weapons hummed to life. Energy collectors throughout the ship fed power into the main plasma cannons. These weapons could melt through the hull of any known starship in seconds. Against these primitive humans, it would be like using a star destroyer to swat insects. "All batteries charged and ready, sir," reported the weapons officer. Fire. Brilliant blue beams of superheated plasma shot across space toward the human ships. The energy weapons moved at nearly light speed, impossible to dodge at this range. Zexthaner expected to see the human ship explode in a ball of fire. Instead, something strange happened. The human ships began moving in ways that made no sense. They used short bursts from small thrusters to change direction quickly. The plasma beams missed their targets by narrow margins. What was that? Zexthaner demanded. "Sir, they seem to have predicted our firing pattern," the tactical officer said, confusion clear in his voice. "They began evasive maneuvers before we fired. Impossible. Our targeting computers are the most advanced in the galaxy." But the humans were doing something else now. All 12 ships had turned to face the Krillian fleet. Strange ports opened along their hulls, revealing what looked like simple metal tubes. "Admiral," Morrison's voice came through the speakers again. "Last chance to withdraw peacefully. We really don't want to fight you." Zexthaner roared in anger. These pathetic creatures were threatening him? "All ships, open fire. Destroy these insects." The entire Krillian fleet unleashed its weapons. Dozens of plasma beams and particle cannons lit up space like a deadly light show. But somehow, the human ships kept dodging. They moved in patterns that seemed random, but kept them just out of harm's way. Then the humans fired back. What came out of those simple metal tubes made no sense at all. They were just metal rods, no bigger than a person's arm. No energy signatures, no exotic matter, no advanced technology at all. Just pieces of metal flying through space. "Sir, what are those things?" asked the communications officer. "Some kind of kinetic weapon," the tactical officer answered. "But they're moving incredibly fast. I'm reading velocities of ... This can't be right." "What are the readings?" Zexthaner demanded. "Sir, those metal rods are moving at nearly 20% of light speed." Zexthaner stared at the screen in shock. That was impossible. No simple kinetic weapon could achieve such velocities. The amount of energy required would be enormous. The first metal rod hit the Krillian cruiser Bone Crusher. The ship's energy shields flared to life automatically, designed to absorb and redirect the impact. But something went wrong. Instead of being deflected, the rod punched straight through the shield as if it wasn't there. The rod hit the ship's hull and kept going. It passed completely through the vessel from front to back, leaving a perfectly round hole behind. Secondary explosions began immediately as the ship's internal systems were destroyed. "Impossible," Zexthaner whispered. "Our shields are designed to stop any kinetic weapon." More metal rods were incoming. His flagship's shields activated as 2 projectiles approached. The energy barriers that had never failed against any enemy weapon flickered and died as the simple metal rods passed through them like they were made of paper. The first rod hit the Void Piercer's engine section. The impact sent shockwaves through the entire ship, throwing everyone on the bridge to the floor. Emergency lights began flashing as damage reports flooded in. "Engine room is gone, sir," reported the damage control officer. "Complete structural failure." The second rod hit near the weapons section. Zexthaner watched in horror as his most advanced plasma cannons simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the kinetic impact of a simple piece of metal. Around him, the rest of the Krillian fleet was suffering the same fate. Ship after ship was being crippled or destroyed by these ridiculous primitive weapons. Their most advanced defenses were useless against humanity's dumb kinetic projectiles. "Sir, requesting permission to retreat," his helm officer said urgently. Zexthaner looked at the tactical display. Half his fleet was already destroyed or disabled. The human ships continued to fire their impossible weapons with deadly accuracy. Each shot was perfectly placed to cause maximum damage. He had come here expecting to face primitive savages with crude weapons. Instead, he found himself outgunned by an enemy using technology so simple it seemed stupid. But stupid or not, it was devastatingly effective. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "Full retreat." As the surviving Krillian ships limped away from the battle, Zexthaner wondered what kind of species could turn such basic technology into such a terrifying weapon. He had a feeling that the galaxy had seriously underestimated these humans, and that was a very dangerous mistake. 3 days after the battle, Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the observation deck of the research vessel New Frontier. She watched as repair crews worked on the damaged Krillian ships. The aliens had agreed to a temporary ceasefire to understand what had happened to them. Elena was a physicist who specialized in weapons technology. She had spent her whole career studying how to make things go very fast and hit very hard. Today, she would explain to the aliens exactly why their advanced shields had failed so completely. A door hissed open behind her. Dr. Kilvorth entered the room, moving carefully on his 4 legs. The Krillian scientist looked tired and confused. His scales had lost their usual bright color, turning a dull gray that meant he was stressed. "Dr. Rodriguez," he said in careful English, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting. My people are very confused about what happened in the battle." Elena turned to face him. "I can imagine. Your shields were designed to stop energy weapons, weren't they?" "Yes," Kilvorth replied. "Our barriers can absorb plasma beams, laser fire, particle cannons, even exotic matter weapons. They have never failed before." "That's exactly the problem," Elena said. She gestured toward the window where the damaged Krillian ships floated. "You built defenses for the weapons you expected to face, but we don't use those kinds of weapons." Kilvorth's head tilted to one side, a sign of confusion in his species. "But your weapons are so primitive. They are just metal projectiles. How can simple kinetic energy defeat our most advanced technology?" Elena smiled. "Let me show you something." She led him to a table where a small device sat. It looked like a miniature version of the weapons the human ships had used. "This is a railgun. It uses electromagnetic fields to accelerate projectiles." "Electromagnetic acceleration," Kilvorth said slowly. "That is very old technology. Most races abandoned it thousands of years ago. Most races moved on to energy weapons because they seemed more advanced," Elena agreed. "But we kept working on the old technology. We made it better and better until it became something new." She picked up a small metal rod from the table. It was no bigger than a pencil and made of ordinary tungsten. "This weighs about 50 grams. Not much, right?" Kilvorth examined the rod with interest. "It seems harmless enough. Now watch what happens when we fire it at 20% of light speed." Elena placed the rod into the demonstration railgun. The device hummed quietly as power built up in its magnetic coils. She pressed a button, and the rod vanished. There was barely any sound, just a soft whoosh of air. Through the window, they could see a small asteroid in the distance. Suddenly, the asteroid exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Kilvorth stared in shock. "That tiny piece of metal did that?" "Kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared," Elena explained. "When you make something go fast enough, mass doesn't matter much. That little rod hit with the force of a nuclear weapon." The Krillian scientist was quiet for a long moment. "But how do you achieve such velocities?" "The energy requirements must be enormous," Elena nodded. "That's where human engineering comes in. We've spent centuries learning how to store and release energy efficiently. Our railguns use superconducting magnetic coils and fusion power cores. Every shot takes about as much energy as powering a small city for a day. Incredible, Kilvorth whispered. But why do these projectiles penetrate our shields? They should absorb the kinetic energy, just like they absorb plasma. Your shields work by converting incoming energy into heat and light, then radiating it away, Elena said. They're very good at handling energy weapons, because those weapons deliver their power over time. Even a powerful laser takes a few milliseconds to burn through a target. She pulled up a holographic display showing the physics involved, but kinetic weapons work differently. All their energy gets delivered in a single instant of impact. Your shields don't have time to absorb and redirect that much energy so quickly. Kilvorth studied the display carefully. So our defenses are useless against your weapons? Not useless, Elena corrected. They do absorb some of the energy, but not enough to stop the projectile completely. It's like trying to stop a speeding train with a fishing net. The door opened again, and Commander Alex Bennett entered. He was a tall man with graying hair and serious eyes. As the military liaison, he worked closely with the science teams to develop new weapons. Dr. Rodriguez, I hope you don't mind the interruption, he said. Dr. Kilvorth, I wanted to show you something that might interest you. Bennett activated a wall screen that showed footage from the recent battle. We recorded everything that happened during the fight. Would you like to see how your ships were destroyed? Kilvorth nodded nervously. The screen showed the Krillian cruiser Bone Crusher just as the first human projectile hit it. The energy shield flared bright blue as it tried to stop the incoming. Rod, see how your shield activates? Bennett pointed to the display. It's working exactly as designed. But watch what happens next. The tungsten rod hit the shield and barely slowed down. The barrier flickered and failed as the projectile punched straight through the ship's hull. The hole was perfectly round and went completely through the vessel from front to back. The projectile was moving so fast that it passed through your entire ship in less than a millisecond, Bennett explained. Your hull armor didn't even have time to react. Kilvorth watched in fascination and horror. The damage is so precise. How do you aim these weapons so accurately at such long range? Practice, Bennett said simply. Humans have been throwing things at targets for thousands of years. We've gotten very good at it. Elena brought up another display showing the human ships during the battle. Our targeting computers can calculate trajectory, accounting for gravity, ship movement, even solar wind. But the real secret is that we fire multiple projectiles in spread patterns. Spread patterns? Kilvorth asked. We don't just fire one rod at a time, Bennett explained. Each railgun can fire dozens of projectiles in rapid succession. We create clouds of tungsten rods that are almost impossible to dodge. The screen showed this in action. Human ships fired what looked like solid streams of metal projectiles. The Krillian vessels tried to evade, but there were simply too many incoming rounds to avoid them all. It's like trying to dodge raindrops in a thunderstorm, Elena said. No matter how fast or agile your ships are, some of our projectiles will hit. Kilvorth was beginning to understand the scope of what had happened. So you defeated our entire fleet using ancient technology that we abandoned long ago? Not ancient, Bennett corrected. Refined. We took the basic concept of throwing rocks and perfected it over centuries. Our railguns represent thousands of years of human engineering. Development. Elena nodded in agreement. Every human child learns to throw a ball. We've been studying projectile motion since before we had written language. When we reached space, we just scaled up the concept. But why? Kilvorth asked. Why didn't you develop energy weapons like every other advanced race? Bennett and Elena exchanged glances. Because we couldn't, Elena admitted. When humans first reached space, we were behind everyone else technologically. We didn't have the knowledge to build plasma cannons or particle beams. So we worked with what we had, Bennett continued. Chemical rockets, metal alloys, electromagnetic fields. We pushed those technologies to their absolute limits. And it worked better than we expected, Elena added. While other races were building more and more complex energy weapons, we were perfecting the art of making things go really, really fast. Kilvorth looked out the window at his damaged ships. My people will not believe this. We were defeated by creatures throwing rocks. Very fast rocks, Bennett said with a slight smile. Don't underestimate the power of simplicity, Dr. Kilvorth. Sometimes the oldest solutions are the best ones. Alana pulled up one final display showing human railgun development over the centuries. We have a saying on Earth, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Kinetic weapons worked for our ancestors, so we just kept making them better. But now that we understand your weapons, Kilvorth said, we can develop countermeasures. Stronger shields, better armor, faster ships. Bennett shook his head. You can try. But remember, we've been working on this technology for a very long time. For every defense you create, we'll find a way to make our projectiles hit harder. Elena smiled. Besides, we've only shown you our basic railguns. Wait until you see what else we've been working on. Kilvorth's scales turned an even paler shade of gray. He was beginning to realize that humanity's primitive weapons might be far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. 2 weeks later, the situation had gotten much worse. Captain Ryan Cooper stood on the bridge of the human command ship Guardian's Watch, watching his tactical display with growing concern. What had started as a simple conflict with the Krillians had turned into something much bigger. Sir, we have 3 more alien fleets approaching, reported Lieutenant Amy Foster from her sensor station. The computer identifies them as Vorthic, Thalorian, and Centauri vessels. Ryan nodded grimly. Word of humanity's victory over the Krillians had spread quickly through the galaxy. Now every major alien power wanted to test themselves against these strange humans with their primitive weapons. How long until they arrive? Ryan asked. The Vorthic fleet will be here in 6 hours, Amy replied. The others will arrive shortly after. Ryan studied the incoming ships on his screen. Each fleet was larger than the Krillian force they had already defeated. Worse, intelligence reports suggested that these aliens had much more advanced technology than the Krillians. Captain, we're receiving a message from the lead Vorthic ship, announced Communications Officer Pete Collins. Admiral Krexall wants to speak with you. Put him through, Ryan ordered. The main screen flickered and showed a creature that looked like a walking insect. Admiral Krexall had 6 arms, compound eyes, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. When he spoke, his voice sounded like buzzing combined with clicking sounds. Human Captain, Krexall said, I am Admiral Krexall of the Vorthic Confederation. We have heard of your recent battle with the Krillians. Admiral, Ryan replied politely, I hope you're here for peaceful negotiations. Krexall made a sound that might have been laughter. We come to test your weapons against our defenses. The Krillians were always weak. Their energy shields are old technology. And yours are better? Ryan asked. Much better. Our quantum phase shields can shift our ships out of normal spacetime. Your primitive projectiles cannot hit what does not exist in your reality. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. He had feared something like this might happen. The aliens were learning from the Krillian defeat and bringing more advanced countermeasures. Sir, whispered his tactical officer, Commander Ben Martinez, if they can phase out of normal space, our railguns might not work. Ryan nodded slightly. This was exactly the kind of problem he had been worried about. Admiral Krexall, we don't want to fight you. Can't we resolve this peacefully? Only after we prove that Vorthic technology is superior to human weapons, Krexall replied. Prepare yourselves. The transmission ended. Ryan turned to his crew. All hands to battle stations. Amy, get me a detailed scan of those Vorthic ships. I want to know exactly how their phase shields work. While the crew prepared for battle, Ryan walked to the engineering section. Engineer Pete Collins was already there, working frantically at a computer terminal with several other technicians. Pete, please tell me you have some ideas, Ryan said. Pete looked up from his work. His hair was messy and his eyes were tired, but he was smiling slightly. Actually, Captain, I might have something, but it's going to sound crazy. After everything we've been through, I'm ready for crazy. Pete pulled up a holographic display showing the structure of the Vorthic ships. Their quantum phase shields work by shifting the ship's matter into a parallel dimension. While phased, they can't be hit by anything in our reality. Right, so how do we shoot something that isn't there? That's the genius part, Pete said. Excitedly, they're not really gone. They exist in a quantum superposition between dimensions. If we can create projectiles that exist in the same superposition, they should be able to hit the phased ships. Ryan stared at him. Pete, are you saying we can make our tungsten rods exist in multiple dimensions at once? Sort of. We coat each projectile with quantum entangled particles before firing. When the railgun accelerates the rod, the entangled particles create a dimensional bridge. The projectile exists in both realities simultaneously. And this will work? Pete shrugged. In theory. I've run the calculations 3 times, and they look good. But we've never tested it in actual combat. How long to modify our ammunition? The fabrication units are already working on it. We'll have quantum entangled rounds ready in 4 hours. Ryan clapped Pete on the shoulder. Good work. What about the other fleets? What can you tell me about Thylorian and Zentari defenses? Pete brought up more displays. The Thylorians use molecular dissolution shields. Any physical matter that gets close to their ships, it's broken down into individual atoms before it can cause damage. And the Zentari? Gravitational barriers. They bend space-time around their ships so severely that incoming projectiles get caught in artificial gravity wells and crushed before impact. Ryan felt overwhelmed. So we need ammunition that can exist in multiple dimensions, survive molecular dissolution, and escape gravitational crushing. All at the same time. Actually, said a new voice, that might be easier than you think. Everyone turned to see Dr. Carl Johnson entering the engineering bay. Carl was the head of human weapons research and one of the smartest people Ryan knew. Carl, thank goodness, Ryan said. Please tell me you have some ideas. Carl smiled and activated his own holographic display. I've been working on this problem since we first heard about the incoming fleets. The solution is actually quite elegant. The display showed a new type of projectile. It looked similar to their standard tungsten rods, but the surface was covered in complex geometric patterns. This is a self-modifying kinetic penetrator, Carl explained. The surface is made of programmable matter that can change its molecular structure in response to different threats. How does it work? Pete asked. When it approaches a quantum phase shield, the programmable matter creates quantum entanglement fields. When it encounters molecular dissolution beams, the surface restructures itself into more stable configurations. When it hits gravitational barriers, it activates built-in gravitational anchors that lock onto local spacetime. Ryan studied the display carefully. One projectile that can adapt to any defense? Exactly. We're essentially creating smart ammunition that can solve problems on its own during flight. Amy Foster's voice came over the intercom. Captain, the Vorthic fleet is dropping out of hyperspace. They're taking attack positions. Ryan hurried back to the bridge. On the main screen, he could see the insect-like Vorthic ships arranging themselves in a battle formation. They looked even more alien and threatening than the Krillians had. "Sir, they're powering up their weapons," Amy reported. "And their shields are activating." Ryan watched as the Vorthic ships seemed to flicker and become translucent. The quantum phase shields were working, shifting the vessels partially out of normal reality. "Captain," Pete called from engineering, "the first batch of quantum entangled. Rounds is ready. Loading them into railgun batteries 1 through 6. All ships prepare to fire," Ryan ordered. The human fleet had grown since the battle with the Krillians. They now had 23 vessels, all equipped with improved railgun systems. Admiral Krexal's voice came through the communication system again. "Human captain, your weapons cannot touch us now. Surrender, and we will make your defeat quick." "Thank you for the offer," Ryan replied, "but we'll have to decline." The Vorthic ships opened fire first. Their weapons were unlike anything Ryan had seen before. Instead of energy beams, they fired bolts of pure quantum energy that seemed to twist reality around them. "Evasive maneuvers," Ryan ordered. The human ships scattered, using their superior maneuverability to avoid the strange attacks. "Sir, those quantum bolts are dangerous," Amy reported. "They're not just weapons. They're trying to phase our ships out of reality. Then we better end this quickly. All ships, target the Vorthic flagship. Fire." The human fleet unleashed its modified ammunition. The quantum-entangled tungsten rods streaked through space toward the phased Vorthic ships. Admiral Krexol's confident voice came through the speakers again. "Foolish humans, your primitive projectiles pass right through. U.S. like we are ghosts." But as they watched, something impossible happened. The tungsten rods struck the phased Vorthic ships as if the quantum shields weren't there at all. The Vorthic flagship shuddered as 3 projectiles punched clean through its hull. Secondary explosions began immediately as the ship's quantum systems overloaded. "Impossible," Krexal screamed. "How are you hitting us while we are phased?" Ryan smiled grimly. "We learned to adapt, Admiral. That's what humans do best." A battle continued as the Thyllorian and Zentari fleets arrived. Each group was confident that their advanced defenses would stop the human weapons. Each group learned the hard way that human engineers were very good at solving problems. When the molecular dissolution shields failed to stop the self-modifying projectiles, the Thyllorian commander demanded to know how simple metal could resist their most advanced technology. When the gravitational barriers were bypassed by ammunition that could anchor itself to space-time, the Zentari collective consciousness experienced something it had never felt before. Confusion. By the end of the day, 3 of the galaxy's most advanced fleets had been defeated by humans, using weapons that everyone considered primitive and stupid. Ryan looked out at the disabled alien ships floating in space around them. "Amy, open a channel to all the alien commanders. This is Captain Cooper to all alien fleets. We're prepared to." 1 week after the 3-fleet battle, Admiral Zex Thunner sat in the conference room of his damaged flagship. Around the large circular table sat the other alien commanders who had been defeated by the humans. The mood was tense and confused. Admiral Krexel's compound eyes reflected the dim lighting as he spoke. "This makes no sense. Our technology is centuries ahead of theirs. How do they keep winning?" Supreme Commander Thylara of the Thyllorians shook her elegant head. Her species looked almost like tall, thin humans except for their silver skin and large black eyes. Their weapons are so simple. Just metal projectiles fired by magnetic fields. It should not work. The strangest member of the group was Collective Node Zen 7742 of the Zentari. It looked like a floating crystal with lights inside that pulsed when it spoke. "Our analysis shows human technology is primitive by all standard measurements. Yet, they defeat us repeatedly." Zexthener looked around the table at his fellow commanders. I have requested a meeting with the human leaders. Perhaps if we understand how they think, we can understand how they fight. The door opened and Captain Ryan Cooper entered, followed by Professor Dan Clark. Dan was an older human with gray hair and kind eyes. He taught military history at the Earth Defense Academy. "Gentlemen," Ryan said, using the universal translator, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting. This is Professor Clark. He studies how different species approach warfare." Dan sat down and looked around the table with interest. "I understand you want to know why human weapons keep working against your defenses." "Yes," Zexthaner said immediately. "Your technology is clearly inferior to ours. By all logic, we should win easily." Dan smiled gently. "That's exactly the problem. You're thinking about this the wrong way." Krexall leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "You assume that newer technology is always better technology," Dan explained. "But that's not always true. Sometimes older methods work better than advanced ones." Thylara looked confused. "But advancement is the goal of all intelligent species. We develop better weapons to replace inferior ones. Do you?" Dan asked. "Or do you develop different weapons to replace working ones?" He activated a small holographic projector and showed images of human weapons throughout history. This is a spear. Humans invented it 50,000 years ago. This is a bow and arrow from 20,000 years ago. This is a gun from 500 years ago. The aliens studied the primitive weapons with curiosity. Notice something interesting? Dan continued. They all work the same way. You take a projectile and make it move fast toward your target. The basic principle never changed. Zen 7742's lights pulsed thoughtfully. "But surely you developed energy weapons as your technology advanced?" "We tried," Dan admitted. "But we discovered something important. Energy weapons have a fundamental problem." "What problem?" Zexthaner asked. Dan changed the holographic display to show different types of weapons firing. Energy weapons must deliver their power over time. Even the fastest laser takes a few milliseconds to burn through a target. This gives the enemy time to react. He showed footage of the recent battles. Your shields work by detecting incoming energy and redirecting it. They're very good at this because they have time to respond. But kinetic weapons work differently, Ryan added. All their energy gets delivered instantly on impact. There's no time for shields to react or adapt. Krexel's mandibles clicked in thought. So you chose primitive weapons because they work better, not because you could not build advanced ones? Not exactly primitive, Dan corrected. Refined. We took the basic concept and perfected it over thousands of years. He showed new images of human railgun technology. Our magnetic acceleration systems are actually very advanced. We just use them to do something very simple, make metal objects go extremely fast. Thylara studied the technical diagrams. But why not develop both types of weapons? Energy weapons for some situations, kinetic weapons for others? And Ryan exchanged glances. Because we couldn't, Dan said honestly. When humans first reached space, we were far behind other races technologically. We didn't have the knowledge to build plasma cannons or particle beams, so you worked with what you had. Zen 7742 observed. Exactly. We had metals, magnets, and electricity. So we learned to use them better than anyone else ever had. Ryan pulled up another display showing human industrial facilities. Our entire civilization is built around making things and moving them around. When we needed weapons, we just applied the same principles. But there is something else, Dan continued. Something more important than technology. Zexthaner leaned forward with interest. What is that? Philosophy. The way humans think about problems is different from other species. Dan activated a new set of images showing human military history. Most races develop weapons by trying to find new and more complex solutions. Humans do the opposite. We look for the simplest solution that works. We have a saying, Ryan added, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Our kinetic weapons work, so we keep using them. Tylara looked puzzled. But surely you want to improve and advance? We do improve, Dan said. But we improve what works, rather than replacing it with something new. Our railguns today are thousands of times more powerful than our first ones. But they still work the same way. He showed a comparison between early human firearms and modern railguns. Same basic principle. Accelerate a projectile toward a target. We just got much better at doing it. Krexall was beginning to understand. So while we abandoned kinetic weapons to pursue energy technology, you perfected kinetic weapons instead. Right. And while you were learning to defend against energy weapons, we were learning to make kinetic weapons unstoppable. Zen 7742's lights pulsed rapidly. This explains why our defenses fail. They were designed to counter the weapons we expected you to have, not the weapons you actually chose to develop. There's another factor too, Dan said. Human stubbornness. Stubbornness? Zexthaner asked. Ryan laughed. Humans don't like to give up. When we face a problem, we keep trying until we solve it. If our weapons don't work, we modify them until they do. Like when you created quantum-entangled ammunition to defeat our phase shields, Krexall said. Exactly. Our engineers saw your defenses as a puzzle to solve, not an impossible barrier. Dan nodded in agreement. Humans have been solving projectile problems for 50,000 years. Hitting a moving target, penetrating armor, calculating trajectory. These are problems we understand very well. But you alien races focused on energy manipulation instead, Ryan continued. You're experts at plasma physics and particle acceleration. But you never specialized in kinetic impact the way we did. Thalara was quiet for a long moment. So we have been fighting you using our strength against your strength. No, Dan corrected gently. You've been fighting using your strength against our strength. Energy weapons and kinetic weapons require completely different areas of expertise. It's like challenging a fish to climb a tree, Ryan added. Even if the fish is very smart, it's the wrong contest for them. Zexthaner looked around the table at his fellow commanders. So what do we do now? How do we defend against weapons that bypass all our technology? Dan and Ryan exchanged another look. Actually, Dan said, that's not the right question either. What do you mean? Zen 7742 asked. You're still thinking about this as a military problem, Ryan explained. But maybe it doesn't have to be a military problem at all. I don't understand, Thalara said. Dan leaned forward. Instead of trying to build better defenses against human weapons, why not work with humans instead of against them? You mean alliance? Krexall asked. I mean cooperation. Humans are good at kinetic weapons and practical engineering. Your races are good at energy manipulation and advanced materials. Together, we could all learn from each other. Ryan nodded. We never wanted to fight you in the first place. We just wanted to protect our home and explore space peacefully. Zexthaner considered this carefully. You would share your weapons technology with us? If you're willing to share yours with us, Ryan replied. Human ships could be much better. With your shield technology, your ships could be much more effective with our weapons. But more importantly, Dan added, we could all focus on exploration and discovery instead of fighting each other. The alien commanders looked at each other uncertainly. They had come to this meeting expecting to learn military secrets. Instead, they were being offered something completely different. This is not what we expected, Thalara admitted. That's very human, Dan said with a smile. We specialize in doing unexpected things. Krexall's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. I am beginning to understand why you keep defeating us. You do not think like we do. No, Ryan agreed. We think like humans. Sometimes that's an advantage. Zen 7742's lights pulsed in a pattern that indicated deep thought. We must consider this proposal carefully. It changes everything. Take all the time you need, Dan said. But remember, the galaxy is a big place. There's room for all of us to succeed together. As the meeting ended, Zexthener realized that humans had done it again. They had taken what seemed like a military defeat and turned it into a completely different kind of victory. 6 months after the peace talks began, everything changed. General Frank Parker stood in the command center on Luna Base, watching the most terrifying sight he had ever seen. On the main display, a massive fleet of alien ships was approaching. Earth's solar system. Sir, we count over 500 vessels, reported Lieutenant Kate Miller from her station. They're moving in perfect formation. Frank studied the tactical readout with growing concern. This wasn't like the previous alien fleets they had faced. Those had been individual races testing human weapons. This was something much bigger and more dangerous. Do we have identification on the ships? Frank asked. Yes, sir, Kate replied. The computer identifies them as the hegemony of advanced civilizations. It's a coalition of the galaxy's most technologically advanced species. Frank felt his stomach drop. The hegemony was legendary throughout the galaxy. They possessed technology that seemed almost magical compared to what most races could build. If they had come to Earth, it meant the situation was extremely serious. Sir, we're receiving a transmission, announced Communications Officer Roy Bennett. It's from their flagship. Put it through, Frank ordered. The screen flickered and showed a being that looked like it was made of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Humans of Earth, the being said, I am Prime Consciousness Axelther of the Hegemony. We have come to end your threat to galactic order. I'm General Parker of Earth Defense Command. Frank replied, What threat are you referring to? Your primitive weapons have disrupted the balance of power in this galaxy, Axelther explained. Advanced races are being defeated by creatures using Stone Age technology. This cannot be allowed to continue. Frank looked around at his staff. Many of them were the same people who had fought in the earlier battles against the Krillians, Vorthek, and others. They had hoped those conflicts were over. Prime Consciousness, we've offered peaceful cooperation to every race we've encountered. We don't want to threaten anyone. Your very existence is a threat, Axelther replied coldly. You prove that advancement and complexity are not necessary for military success. This undermines the foundation of our civilization. The transmission ended abruptly. Frank turned to his chief engineer, Roy Bennett, who had been working frantically at his station throughout the conversation. Roy, please tell me you have some good news, Frank said. Roy looked up with worried eyes. Sir, I've been analyzing their ships. The technology is unlike anything we've ever seen before. They have defensive systems that work on principles we don't even understand. What kind of defenses? Dimensional barriers that exist outside normal space-time. Temporal shields that accelerate time around their ships so projectiles decay before impact. Reality anchors that lock their vessels into a quantum state where they cannot be harmed by physical weapons. Frank felt overwhelmed. So our railguns won't work? Not the standard ones, Roy admitted. But I've been working on something new. He activated a holographic display showing a strange-looking device. It looked nothing like the railguns they had used before. Instead of a simple tube, it had complex geometric patterns and what appeared to be multiple firing chambers. What is it? Frank asked. A reality railgun, Roy said proudly. Instead of just accelerating tungsten rods, it accelerates packets of fundamental reality itself. Frank stared at him. I'm going to need you to explain that in terms I can understand. Roy smiled slightly. Remember how we solved the quantum phase shield problem by making our projectiles exist in multiple dimensions? This takes that concept to its logical extreme. He pointed to different parts of the device. Instead of firing matter, we fire the basic laws of physics themselves. Momentum, kinetic energy, conservation of mass, the fundamental forces that make the universe work. And this will penetrate their defenses? It should. You can't defend against the laws of reality because you exist within those laws. It's like trying to hide from gravity by going underground. Chief Engineer Pete Collins entered the command center carrying a tablet full of data. General, the fabrication units have finished building the first reality railgun. We're installing it on the Guardian's watch right now. How long until it's ready? Frank asked. 20 minutes for installation, then we need to test it. Pete replied, but sir, there's something else you should know. What? The hegemony ships aren't just sitting there waiting. They're deploying some kind of consciousness-disrupting field. It's designed to shut down any advanced computer system or artificial intelligence. Frank understood immediately. They're trying to disable our targeting computers. Exactly. They assume our weapons are guided by sophisticated eye systems like theirs are. Roy grinned. But they don't know about our backup systems. Frank raised an eyebrow. What backup systems? Come with me, Roy said, leading them to another section of the command center in a room that looked like it belonged in a museum. Dozens of human operators sat at old-fashioned mechanical desks. They were using slide rules, mechanical calculators, and paper charts to perform complex calculations. Meet our analog fire control team, Roy announced. When all the computers fail, these people can still calculate firing solutions using nothing but math and old-fashioned tools. Gunnery Sergeant. Kate Miller looked up from her slide rule. General, we've been calculating trajectories manually for the past hour. Even if they shut down every computer on Earth, we can still hit their ships. Frank was amazed. Why do we have this system? Because humans don't trust technology to always work. Pete explained. We always build backup systems for our backup systems. An alarm began sounding throughout the base. Sir, the hegemony fleet is moving into attack position, reported a technician. Frank hurried back to the main command center. On the display, he could see the alien ships arranging themselves in a complex formation around Earth. Their technology was so advanced that some of the vessels seemed to flicker in and out of existence. General, we're ready to test the reality. Railgun? Roy announced. Target? Frank asked. There's a small asteroid about 1 million kilometers away. Perfect for testing. Fire when ready. Roy pressed a button, and something incredible happened. There was no visible projectile, no flash of light, no energy beam. But suddenly, the distant asteroid simply ceased to exist. It didn't explode or break apart. It was just gone. What happened to it? Frank asked in amazement. We fired a packet of entropy at it, Roy explained. The asteroid experienced several billion years of decay in about 3 seconds. Before Frank could respond, Prime Consciousness Axeltha's voice filled the command center again. Humans, we detect that you have activated your consciousness disruptor countermeasures. Surrender now, and your extinction will be quick. Frank smiled grimly. This is General Parker. We haven't activated any countermeasures. We don't need them. Impossible. Our consciousness field should have disabled all your systems. You disabled our computers, Frank admitted. But humans learned to fight wars long before we had computers. We can still operate without them. There was a long pause. You are bluffing. No advanced race can function without artificial intelligence support. Watch this, Frank said. He turned to Kate Miller. Sergeant, target their flagship with the Reality Railgun. Manual calculation only. Kate bent over her slide rule and began working. Around her, other operators used their mechanical tools to verify her math. After 2 minutes, she looked up. Target acquired, sir. Firing solution calculated. And verified. Fire. Frank ordered. Roy pressed the button again. This time, everyone watched as the Hegemony flagship began to age rapidly. Its crystalline hull turned gray and brittle. Its energy fields flickered and died. Within seconds, the most advanced ship in the galaxy had become a drifting hulk. Other Hegemony ships immediately began retreating. Prime Consciousness Axelthor's voice came through the speakers one last time, much weaker than before. This is impossible. You cannot defeat us with primitive weapons and manual calculations. You keep using that word, primitive, Frank replied. I don't think it means what you think it means. Captain Steve Walsh, who had been commanding the Guardian's watch, spoke up over the communication system. Prime Consciousness, would you like to know the secret of human weapons? What secret? Axelthor asked weakly. We don't try to be more advanced than our enemies. We try to be more fundamental. I do not understand. Dr. Alana Rodriguez, who had joined the conversation from her research station, explained patiently. While you were building weapons that manipulate energy and matter, we built weapons that use the basic forces that energy and matter must obey. You cannot defend against momentum because everything with mass has momentum, added Roy. You cannot shield against entropy because entropy affects everything in the universe. And you cannot disrupt manual calculations because human brains don't work like computer systems, Kate Miller added from her station. Prime Consciousness Axelthor was quiet for a long moment. So you defeat us not by surpassing our technology, but by ignoring it entirely. We defeat you by remembering that the universe has rules, Frank said. And those rules apply to everyone, no matter how advanced they think they are. The remaining Hegemony ships continued their retreat. As they disappeared into hyperspace, F